Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Welcome to ISKCON of Silicon Valley. Thank you all for coming. Tonight we'll discuss several verses from the Bhagavad Gita. And it's a continuation from our last discussion, which is on verse 7:15. And if you'll remember, this verse 7:15 was a catalog of those who are without faith, and Krishna named 4 types of people who are what he calls duskriti. And after he mentions these duskriti, du means bad, and kriti means expert. So they're expert at being bad. And then there's the sukritis that he mentions in the next 3 verses. And that is verse 16, 17, 18 in the 7th chapter. So we'll discuss them today. And in doing so, we'll hear how it is that Krishna feels for those who have faith in him. And even if they are in material consciousness to some degree, that is, they're approaching him for some reason, they want something in return, how Krishna still appreciates them because they're approaching him. And then we'll have some discussion about these various kinds of devotees and their levels, and we'll try to relate it to any kind of situations we might have experienced in our own life, and we'll talk about ways in which one can make advancement in devotional service from any situation in life, no matter where one's starting from. So that could be useful, since we're all starting from somewhere, right? First, I offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who made available the teachings of Bhagavad Gita to the Western world, especially in a way that everyone could easily understand their ultimate purpose, which is to advance in Krishna consciousness and come to know Krishna. Now we'll look at verse number 716. Actually 7:15, because I want to just review the verse that we read last time. And I'll read the English translation, and then anyone who was here for this class, you can mention if you remember any of the points that we brought up during the class. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. So let's hear if you remember anything from our discussion about this verse.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, Maharaj. So it was one very fascinating verse, and Krishna clearly gives the like sometime we become and while when we preach or when we try to share knowledge, we sometimes see that people don't accept. So then this verse gives some relief. Okay, these people.
So if I understand correctly, you're thinking in a very practical way. What he said was that as he's moving about the world presenting Krishna consciousness to various people, he sees their reluctance. Oftentimes they won't take Krishna consciousness, and there are reasons why they may not do it. And because of hearing from this verse and the way in which Krishna's classified people according to their reluctance to take Krishna consciousness, it gives him some insight into why they're not taking it.
Yeah. Yes, Maharaj.
Thank you very much. Sundarananda Prabhu? Try it again. Ramananda? Red mic.
So I was just remembering the first category of people that Prabhupada describes in the purport as one who is grossly foolish, and they work hard like an ass, and then because then Srila Prabhupada explains how ass works really hard, but ultimately and thinks that the master is giving the maintenance. So similarly, the people actually who are grossly foolish works very hard and thinks that they are being maintained by the masters. I mean the masters in the material world.
Yeah. So there's free grass by the side of the road, but the donkey works very hard for the master, who gives him a little grass at the end of the day, thinking this is the only way that I can survive. There's a way in which the Srimad Bhagavatam describes how every living entity is being maintained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Those who are brahmanas have a disposition in life in which they simply take what comes naturally by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And they consider that they're being maintained by the Lord. And devotees, in their process of surrender to Krishna, also adopt this mood that Krishna is my maintainer and he's also my protector. And they have a great awareness that Krishna is taking care of them, whereas the mudha has no awareness and thinks that only this maintenance is coming through my hard labor from my immediate master. It's not aware and of Krishna's presence and maintenance. And there is also a way in which such a person may simply be attached to the base pleasures of life, satisfied, as this verse described, the purport described, Srila Prabhupada describes the way in which Hare Krishna, Dasa Prabhu, my humble obeisances. Welcome to ISKCON Silicon Valley. Please welcome my dear godbrother Dasa Prabhu. Hare Krishna. The beast of burden is attached to the base pleasures of life and thinks that those are the ultimate goal, simply being satisfied with some eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Thinks this is the all in all. Okay, what else did you hear or remember from last time? Yes, Navina Prabhu.
Duskritis are people who do bad work. They're engaged in bad work. There's kriti or meritorious work, but duskriti is bad work. So they're very intelligent in doing the wrong thing. And there seems to be a trend nowadays that people define their level of success, achievement, and education by how good they become at doing bad things.
Thank you. Living entities are very intelligent. If you go to the wilderness, you can see that living entities figure out how to do all kinds of things, build themselves little nests, and capture other living entities and so forth. And humans are very intelligent because their consciousness is expanded. But if they use that expertise and heightened intelligence to build a network which is ultimately for the base pleasures of life, then the Hitopadesh says there's no difference between the animal and the human. And this point that you're making about duskrita, du means bad, and kriti means expert. So expert at being bad. And there's a way in which the whole society, although it looks as if it's developing, can be based on these principles of du, or badness, and not amount to anything except for a more entangling situation for everybody. What about the other categories? What else do you remember from this verse? We talked about mudha, those who are addicted to hard labor for maintenance and just some of the base pleasures of life. Who are the others that Krishna mentions? Yes.
I remember that knowledge, third one, the knowledge is stolen by illusion. So Prabhupada mentioned that how they misinterpret Bhagavad Gita's knowledge, and then they give the more impersonalist or the ideas that is not at all conveyed by the Krishna.
Yes. Maya apritagyana. There's a way in which people become very expert, academically, highly learned, maybe know Sanskrit, maybe know everything, all the sections of the Vedas, but because their ultimate goal is not to surrender to Krishna, rather it's to not surrender to Krishna, then there's a way in which their knowledge is stolen away. So maya prita jnana means their jnana is srita, it's stolen. So they may present themselves as being highly learned, but because of their state of heart, the wrong attitude, they become devoid of any practical realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hare Krishna. Welcome to ISV. We're very happy you came all the way from Minnesota. Hare Krishna. What else? 2 more categories. The Maya Pritagyana, very expert, academically equipped, but knowledge is stolen away. So they come to the opposite conclusion that Krishna is actually giving. They might write commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam and others, but because of their state of heart is du, they become duskritis by misinterpreting everything. Yes, Navina Prabhu.
The asuras are naturally, spontaneously averse towards anything that's godly or divine or somehow related, and we can have a very clear perception of that when we go out on Sankirtan. Some people, just by seeing a book, seeing a devotee, they become very hostile, they become very agitated. It just goes totally against whatever they stand for. They don't know why even sometimes. It's like a visceral reaction. You want to add to that?
Okay, so they're naturally and vehemently atheistic and against the idea that there's God, and go out of their way to expunge God from any conversation. They discourage other people from thinking about God or pursuing a godly life. They invent philosophies that are cynical about the entire pursuit of God. They consider it to be primitive, the idea of worshiping God, that science has actually answered all the questions or will in the future sometimes answer the questions, and that people who pursue God and a godly life are simply misled, naive, and so forth. This is the asura. And what other class did Krishna mention? We covered 3. There's one more. Yes, please tell us about Naradhama. And say the DH like a man.
I think Prabhupada says that means there are so many species of life, and then 400,000 species of human life, and most of them are uncivilized. But the demons who don't surrender to Krishna and propose all these principles must be the lowest of all the mankind, because that's why Prabhupada calls them Naradhama.
So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about how there's various kinds of people. Some of them are not interested in spiritual life, some are interested, and then some are interested and they know about Krishna. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu goes into more detail when he speaks to Sanatana Goswami, and he talks about how there are people, human beings, who are not civilized, they're outside any regulation of the Varnashrama. Then there's people within the Varnashrama, but they simply follow it officially. And there are the others within the Varnashrama, but they're actually very strict and have an idea about coming to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then there are devotees. And then amongst the devotees, there are very progressive devotees and there are pure devotees. There are various gradations of people. So the Naradamas are at the bottom of the list. However, they don't have any principle. They don't recognize any principle of religious pursuit or regulation in their life. So we heard these categories directly from Krishna last week. We'll read it again. These miscreants who are grossly foolish, who are lowest among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. Now we'll move to the next verse. And as I mentioned, in the next three verses, Krishna will enumerate the Sukritis, those who have faith in him. So let's look at the next verse, please. I'll say, please repeat. Chaturvida bhajante mam jana sukritano arjuna arto jignasur artarthi gnani cha bharatarshapha chaturvida bhajante mam jana sukritino jana arto jignasa artarthi gnani cha bharatarshapha chaturvidha bhajante mam jana sukritino jana arto jignasur artarthi Jnani cha bharatarshapha. The translation. O best among the Bharatas, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desirer of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. Let's say it together. O best among the Bharatas, 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service unto me: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. Srila Prabhupada's purport. Unlike the miscreants, there are adherents of the regulative principles of the scriptures, and they are called Sukritina, or those who obey the rules and regulations of scriptures, the moral and social laws, and are more or less devoted to the Supreme Lord. Out of these, there are 4 classes of men: those who are sometimes distressed, those who are in need of money, those who are sometimes inquisitive, and those who are sometimes searching after knowledge of the absolute truth. These persons come to the Supreme Lord for devotional service under different conditions. These are not pure devotees because they have some aspiration to fulfill in exchange for devotional service. Pure devotional service is without aspiration and without desire for material profit. The Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu defines pure devotion thus: Anya pilashita shunyam jnana karmanyadavratam anakulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktiruttama. One should render transcendental loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. When these four kinds of persons come to the Supreme Lord for devotional service and are completely purified by the association of a pure devotee, they also become pure devotees. As far as miscreants are concerned, for them devotional service is very difficult because their lives are selfish, irregular, and without spiritual goals. I'll read that again. As far as miscreants are concerned, for them devotional service is very difficult because their lives are selfish, irregular, and without spiritual goals. So what are the three aspects of their lives that make it difficult? Selfish, irregular, and without spiritual goals. But even some of them, by chance, when they come in contact with a pure devotee, also become pure devotees. Those who are always busy with fruitive activities come to the Lord in material distress, and at that time associate with pure devotees, and because in their distress, those who are always busy with fruitive activities come to the Lord in material distress, and at that time associate with pure devotees and become, in their distress, devotees of the Lord. Those who are simply frustrated also come sometimes to associate with the pure devotees and become inquisitive to know about God. Similarly, when the dry philosophers are frustrated in every field of knowledge, they sometimes want to learn of God, and they come to the Supreme Lord to render devotional service and thus transcend knowledge of the impersonal Brahman and the localized Paramatma, and come to the personal conception of Godhead by the grace of the Supreme Lord or his pure devotee. On the whole, when the distressed, the inquisitive, the seekers of knowledge, and those who are in need of money are free from all material desires, and when they fully understand that material remuneration has nothing to do with spiritual improvement, they become pure devotees. As long as such a purified stage is not attained, devotees in transcendental service to the Lord are tainted with fruitive activities, to search for mundane knowledge, etc. The search for mundane knowledge, etc. So one has to transcend all this before one can come to the stage of pure devotional service. So back up to the verse. So this verse now lists four categories of sukritis. So su means good, and kriti means expert. So these are four positive situations for people to be in. And the four categories are arta, which means somebody in distress. And the iconic figure for this type of approach to the Supreme Lord is Gajendra. Because Gajendra who was the king of the elephants in the heavenly planet, and was living a beautiful life according to his standard. He was respected by all. He had a beautiful family and so forth. When he went one day to a heavenly lake and began to bathe and also assist his family members in bathing in that beautiful lake, was attacked by a crocodile. And when the crocodile attached himself to Gajendra's leg, Gajendra began to struggle, and he struggled for 1,000 years and was not able to free himself from this dangerous situation. At that time, he called out to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He remembered from his last life prayers that he had recited when in his last life he had been a king named Indradyumna. And this piety and the previous connection to Krishna that he had carried over to his next life. So he had that sukriti, which is an important aspect of sukriti, or what we call sometimes spiritual pious credits. They accumulate within the heart of the living entity. In fact, Srila Prabhupada describes how this sukriti accumulates in one's heart, which is like a bank account. And when there's enough of this sukriti, then the fruit is born. When there's bhakti sukriti from contact with devotees, mostly unknowingly, called agyata sukriti, and there's enough of accumulation, then shraddha, or faith in devotional service, awakens within the heart of the devotee. This is confirmed in the Brihat Naradiya Purana, as quoted by Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the Jaiva Dharma. So King Indradyumna, even though in an elephant body, in great distress, and everyone will come to some situation in life when they feel that crocodile on their leg. And he turned spontaneously towards Krishna. In fact, in the beginning, he didn't even know he was turning toward Krishna. He only knew he was in distress, and because of his previous activities, practicing prayers to the Supreme Lord, he turned and called out to the Supreme, not knowing exactly who it was. But because of the intensity of his need when he was calling out, Krishna recognized the angst in his voice and that he was calling out. This is a great lesson to learn, and that is that the quality of one's calling out to the Lord is what attracts him. Not simply the calling out, but the great need that one has within one's heart to connect to the Lord. So Gajendra in his prayers, and many of you have read Gajendra's prayers or memorized them, know that he apologizes. Once he recognizes that he's calling out to the Supreme, he recognizes this and he says that your pure devotees don't ask for anything. I'm asking for something. I'm in great distress right now, and pure devotees don't even ask you for anything, but I have a crocodile on my leg right now, so please help me. And Krishna did help him. He came in this form of Narayan and liberated Gajendra and also the crocodile. So this is arta, or distress. And Gajendra is famous, although he approached the Lord with some material necessity. Then we have Jignasur and Artarti. So we'll talk about Artarti next, which is those who desire wealth. And it's interesting the way the words are set up, Arto, Jignasa, Artarti, because Jignasur is considered, called inquisitive. So, as explained by Baladev Vidyabhusan, who comments on this verse, Krishna has put Jignasur in between Arto and Artarti, because eventually those who are in great distress and approach Krishna, or those who need wealth, they desire wealth, and they pray to Krishna for that, they eventually become Jignasur, or curious, more curious about the Lord. So Artarti means one feels a lack in one's life and wants to have some land, some money, sons, daughters, accoutrements of the material world. And ask Krishna for this. So the iconic figure in the Srimad Bhagavatam for this is Dhruva Maharaj, who as a small child was deprived of the honor of sitting on his father's lap. It's a natural propensity for a child to want to sit on his father's lap, but he was denied that right by his stepmother, who insulted him and said, "You can't sit there because you weren't born from my womb." And she advised him that, you can take your recourse by going to God. So he ran off in an angry mood extremely distraught and went to his mother, who said, yes, actually it's true. If you want to solve this problem, you have to go to God. And Dhruva Maharaj, being extremely determined to have revenge and to get what he wanted, ran off to the forest with such great determination that it attracted the attention of Narada Muni. Prabhupada explains that although the Srimad Bhagavatam says that Narada Muni overheard the conversation between his mother and him, that is, between Dhruva and his mother, he asked the question, how is this possible since Narada wasn't there? And he answers that because Krishna is within everyone's heart and notices the desire of the supreme of each living entity, he then informs those who he is designated to assist those who are on the path of spiritual life to go and intercept those particular living entities. So Narada did that. And it's also noted in that section that if one has such an intense desire to reach Krishna, that the guidance then comes naturally by Krishna's arrangement. The guide, the guru comes and gives one help. So Narada did that and instructed Dhruva Maharaj, first of all, to give up his ambition and simply go back and tolerate and integrate back into his normal palace life by respecting the various relationships that he had. And Dhruva said, thanks for the advice, but I can't take it. That's very Brahminical advice you gave, and I'm a hot-blooded Kshatriya, and I can't actually abide by that. And off he went. And then, having passed Narada's test, Narada then gave him instruction about how to approach Krishna to fulfill his desire. So when Dhruva Maharaj went to the forest, he followed exactly what his spiritual master Narada had said, which was to prepare himself to flawlessly chant this Vishnu mantra, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And Dhruva did that, all the while wanting to fulfill his burning desire to have a kingdom bigger than even his great-grandfather. And when Krishna finally appeared, and he saw him, that is, Dhruva saw him face to face, then he was repentant and said, I wish I hadn't asked for this. In fact, he said that I was praying for broken glass, but now I've attained the greatest jewel. Then we have Jignasu, which means curious about the Supreme Lord. And the iconic figure mentioned in the Shastra is Shaunaka. At Naimasaranya, Shaunaka meets Sutta Goswami. Shaunaka Rishi was the eldest of the members of the sages of Naimasaranya who were concerned with performing karmakanda activities until they saw that it wasn't working. And Sutta Goswami came among them and was selected as their spiritual guide. And Shaunaka began asking questions, which we'll note in the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, form the basis of the rest of the Bhagavatam in the answers that come from what Shaunaka asks. He's inquisitive about what are the various incarnations of the Lord. He asked, there are many scriptures, and they say many different things, so how do we understand what is the essence of all those scriptures? Please describe that to us. He asked, what is the ultimate goal of life? He asked, who is there, after hearing about this, who won't take it up? And based on those questions, his curiosity, then Sutta Goswami gave the answers from what he had already heard, and that is the Bhagavatam. Then we have the Jnani. Jnani cha Bharata Rishabha. So Rishabha means Bharata Rishabha, a great one among the descendants of Bharata. He's talking to Arjuna. He mentions, Krishna does, the Jnani. And here in the word for word, one who knows things as they are. So technically, the Jnani is one who is nishkama. He's come to the end of material desire. But that doesn't mean that a Jnani is necessarily spiritually progressive according to the progressive according to the standard of the Bhagavatam. As Narada Muni says in the 5th chapter of the 1st canto of the Bhagavatam, Naishkarmyam apyachuta bhava varjitam nashobate jnanam alam niranjanam kutak puna shashvada padramishvare nacharpitam karma yadapyakaranam. He says that even if one is nishkama, it has no material desires, naishkarmyam, and is engaged in work that is without any desire, naishkarmyam apyachuta bhava varjitam, that if he doesn't have achuta bhava, which means this emotion for serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead and redeveloping his relationship with God, with Krishna, achuta, then nashobate jnanam alam niranjanam, his process is not very nice. It's not beautiful. It's not attractive. Nashobate jnanam alam niranjanam. He says, what to speak of somebody who's engaged in material activities, which are misery from the beginning to end. So the Jnani that's mentioned in this verse, and we'll see this as we go in the next 2 verses, is not an ordinary Jnani that Krishna is mentioning. Because in the next verse, which we'll look at right now, he says, Tesham Jnani Nitya Yukta Eka Bhaktir Vishishyate Priyohi Jnani No Tirartam Aham Sacha Mama Priyaha Aham Sacha Mama Priya. He said it's better not to use the Anushvara. Okay, so the translation of these, now he's speaking of the 4, the one who is in full knowledge, that's the Jnani, Tesham Jnani Nityukta, and who is always engaged in pure devotional service is the best, for I am very dear to him and he is dear to me. So out of these 4, the Jnani is mentioned, but he here is being more clearly defined as not an ordinary Jnani who's after impersonal knowledge and wanting to merge into the absolute, but actually Eka Bhaktir Vishishyate, as this verse says, his primary interest in life is bhakti. He wants to become a devotee of the Lord. So the purport here, free from all contaminations of material desires, the distressed, the inquisitive, the penniless, and the seeker of supreme knowledge can all become pure devotees. And the iconic figures that describe the Jnani from this verse, where the 4 Sukritis are mentioned, the Jnani, is the 4 Kumaras and Shukadeva Goswami. So we know Shukadeva Goswami was reluctant to come out of the womb of his mother because he was concerned about being connected to the material world. Someone might think that's a little too much concern. But actually, for one who understands the entangling nature of the world, there can't be too much concern. In fact, even Prahlad Maharaj in his prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev, after encountering the fearsome figure of Nrsimhadev that scared everybody in the universe, including all the demigods, Prahlad said, I'm not afraid of you. I'm afraid of your Maya, because I know that just sticking a little finger in that wheel and I can be pulled away again and ground up. Nishpidyamanam upakarsha vibho prapanam. He said there's a big wheel of Maya moving in this material world and it's very easy to get caught in that and taken away. So I'm afraid of that, he said. So Shukadeva Goswami was not at all attracted to the material world. It had nothing to do with it. Krishna finally convinced him that he could come out of the womb with impunity. And when he did, he took off running. Normally in that culture, one would stay for a reformation ceremony by taking the sacred thread from one's father, which usually takes place when a child is about 8 or 9 years old, right? But he was 16 after being in the womb, and he's nothing. He didn't even glance at his family. He just took off running. And his father ran after him and called after him. And Shukadeva went to the forest. There, absorbed in non-attachment to the material world, the kind of relief that comes from not interacting at all with the material mind and senses and their connection to the material world. He was attracted back into his family and to the guidance of his father after his father sent out some of his students into the forest to recite verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam. As an example, Aho Bhakiyam Stana Kalakutam, spoken originally by Uddhava, who said, "Oh, who would take shelter of anyone other than Krishna?" Because Krishna is so merciful that even though Putana approached him to kill him, he accepted her as a devotee because she dressed like a devotee. And when he heard these nectarian verses from the Srimad Bhagavatam, his mind became attracted, even though it wasn't attracted to anything material, which is one of the ways in which the Bhagavatam proves that the vibration of the Bhagavatam is not part of this material world. Because Atmaramas Chamunayo Nigranta Apyurukrame, it attracts even those who are Atmarama. They're no longer entangled in the material world or attracted to it in the least. But when they hear Srimad Bhagavatam, they're attracted. So Shukadeva Goswami was then attracted back to the tutelage of his father and then set out into the world on a mission of mercy to speak the Bhagavatam to others. But he's mentioned and as the figure who is called this Jnani, and so are the four Kumaras, who became transformed when they went to Vaikuntha and they smelled the beautiful scent that came from the lotus feet of the Lord. And those who enter into a Hare Krishna temple or go near a Hare Krishna devotee, in fact, sometimes devotees who congregate in a Hare Krishna temple then get on an airplane or walk in an office, people go, "Oh, you smell beautiful. What is that?" Because they smell the incense and the flowers. Most people get all kinds of objectionable smells, at least objectionable from our point of view, in their environment. But devotees have all these beautiful smells. And when people enter into a temple, then they smell the incense or the flowers offered to the Lord. Prabhupada mentions in the third canto of the Bhagavatam, they become imperceptibly liberated, or liberated even without their knowing it. As their minds are carried away, the beautiful smell, and they are liberated in that moment. So the four Kumaras entering into Vaikuntha, although being unattached to anything, became attached to the Supreme Lord after getting the scent of the tulsi leaves that adorned Lord Narayan's lotus feet, and they became devotees. So these are the four Sukritis mentioned. So again, from the purport, free from all contaminations of material desires, the distressed, the inquisitive, the penniless, and the seeker after supreme knowledge can all become pure devotees. But out of them, he who is in knowledge of the absolute truth and free from all material desires becomes a really pure devotee of the Lord. And of the four orders, the devotee who is in full knowledge and is at the same time engaged in devotional service is, the Lord says, the best. By searching after knowledge, one realizes that his self is different from his material body, and when further advanced, he comes to the knowledge of impersonal Brahman and Paramatma. When one is fully purified, he realizes that his constitutional position is to be the eternal servant of God. So by association with pure devotees, the inquisitive, the distressed, the seeker after material amelioration, and the man in knowledge all become themselves pure. But in the preparatory stage, the man who is in full knowledge of the Supreme Lord and is at the same time executing devotional service is very dear to the Lord. He is situated in pure knowledge of the transcendence of the Supreme Personality of God and is so protected in devotional service that material contamination cannot touch him. So now the question comes up, and I'm going through these three verses as a summary first before we have more discussion. Does Krishna not like the other three? he's dear to the Jnani. It's stated in this verse, Tesham Jnani Nitya Yukta Eka Bhaktir Vishishite Priyo Hi Jnani No Tyartam Ahamsa Chama Priya. He says, Priya, they're dear to me. The Jnani, which means that he's Eka Bhaktir, his main purpose in life is bhakti. So then the Acharyas ask the question, what about the other three? Are they dear to Krishna also? And here comes the amazing answer in the next verse, which will require a little water. Here it is. Here's the answer. Udara sarve vaite Jnani twat maiva mematam Astita sahiyuktatma Mamevan uttamam gatin Mamevam uttamam gatim. 2 T's, you got to hang on both. Okay, next, translation. All these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me I consider to be just like my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he is sure to attain me, the highest and most perfect goal. So here the word udarak, go back to the word for word, please. He answers, they're magnanimous. All of them are magnanimous. Whether the person's approaching Krishna because of arta, which means he's in distress, or artarti, which means that he desires some material benefit, or he's jignasu, he's curious. Still Krishna says magnanimous, because they're approaching, these people are approaching me. They're all sukriti, they're all pious. So back to the purport or translation. All these devotees are undoubtedly magnanimous souls, but he who is situated in knowledge of me I consider to be just like my own self. Being engaged in my transcendental service, he is sure to attain me, the highest and most perfect goal. And then he goes on to again glorify the Jnani who is engaged in Eka Bhakti, which means his purpose in life is to serve Krishna purely. Here's Prabhupada's purport. It is not that devotees who are less complete in knowledge are not dear to the Lord. The Lord says that all are magnanimous because anyone who comes to the Lord for any purpose is called a Mahatma, or great soul. The devotees who want some benefit out of devotional service are accepted by the Lord because there is an exchange of affection. Out of affection, they ask the Lord for some material benefit, and when they get it, they become so satisfied that they also advance in devotional service. But the devotee in full knowledge is considered to be very dear to the Lord because his only purpose is to serve the Supreme Lord with love and devotion. Such a devotee cannot live a second without contacting or serving the Supreme Lord. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is very fond of his devotee and cannot be separated from him. In the Srimad Bhagavatam 9.468, the Lord says, Sadhavoridayam hahyam sadhunam hridayam tvaham maranyate jananti naham tebhyo managapi. The devotees are always in my heart, and I am always in the hearts of the devotees. The devotee does not know anything beyond me, and I also cannot forget the devotee. There is a very intimate relationship between me and the pure devotees. Pure devotees in full knowledge are never out of spiritual touch, and therefore they are very much dear to me. So now let's talk about how the devotees who are influenced by material desire, but nonetheless approach the Supreme Lord to fulfill those material desires, or to fulfill their curiosity, or to get free from distress, how they're magnanimous souls, and what happens to them. What are the stages of progress that they go through? So this may be important because most people, according to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, start with some kind of material attachment. It's very rare that somebody comes into the world with this eka bhakti, or desire for pure devotional service, and with no complexities in their life or no ulterior motives. So the Srimad Bhagavatam gives this advice. Akama sarva kamova moksha kama udarati tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. And that is that if somebody has no material desires or has all material desires, possible? Or does it simply desires liberation because they want out of the whole mess altogether? Or they're pure devotees, is that all of them should approach me, because by the touch of bhakti tivrena, this intensity of bhakti, all of them will come to the perfect stage, they'll become purified. So how does this work? Well, Krishna mentions several times in the Bhagavad Gita that he's within everyone's heart as the well-wisher, and also as the one who is, as everyone's well-wisher, the living entity's well-wisher. It's mentioned in the Upanishads as well, like the Shvetashvatara Upanishad that says that the Lord and the living entity are sitting like two birds in a tree. And the Lord is the witnessing bird, and the living entity is the eating bird. The eating bird is trying to enjoy the various fruits of the material world. Whereas the witnessing bird, who's the Supreme Lord, is transcendental to the material world, has no interest in it. His only interest is in assisting his friend, the eating bird. And in the Gita, Krishna says that wherever the living entity goes, I go with him. And I'm also his supplier. And I give him intelligence, knowledge, forgetfulness when he needs it. And he says, Suridam Sarvabhutanam, I'm the friend, the best friend of all living entities. So Krishna's there within the heart. And his objective ultimately is to assist every living entity in coming back to pure devotional service. But he doesn't interfere with the living entity's minute independence. However, when he sees that a living entity is inclined towards devotional service, even if it's mixed with some material motive, then he helps that living entity in all respects. So, in the Bhagavatam, it is mentioned, Satyam dishati artito nrinam, naivartato yad artito yata, swayam vitate bhagavan anishvaram, ichapitaham nijapada pallavam. And this means, verse spoken by Krishna, that sometimes people approach me for material benedictions. Satyam artito ninam. They ask again and again, please give me this, please give me that. Possible? Chutananda Prabhu was once in Tirupati waiting in a long line, and those of you who have been to Tirupati know that there are long lines. It's worth the wait. And there was a family in front of him, and they were discussing what they were going to ask from Balaji. And so he was listening in, so he said, what are you going to ask for? And one of the young men in the family said, I want to ask him for a job. He said, what kind of job do you want? He said, oh, I'm an engineer. And he said, well, what else? He said, I want to make $50,000 a year. And this was in the 1970s, so it was a lot of money. And Chutananda said, this is the Lord of Vaikuntha. You're going to ask him for $50,000? And the boy thought about it for a few minutes and he goes, okay, 100,000. There's a way in which someone may ask for some material benediction, which is from the point of view of the pure devotees, a transgression. But from the point of view of Krishna, he says in this verse, someone may ask me for material benediction, but at least they're asking me. So he says, they ask me again and again, so I'll give him the benediction, but I do it in such a way, ichapidanam means that I cover over their material desire, they forget about it. And instead I replace it with my devotional service. I give him my lotus feet. Ichapi danam nijapala palavam. And I give him my own lotus feet instead of the material benediction. I do a switch on them. And sometimes that may occur in the form of Krishna's special mercy where he takes away everything so that the devotee becomes so fully dependent on him that he just surrenders and takes shelter. So this is a recommendation that whatever way in which one approaches Krishna, it's considered to be sukriti, it's pious. And by that contact with Krishna, and Prabhupada mentions this in his purports, or his pure devotees, in the course of their pursuing their material ambitions, they then change their course in life, especially by association with pure devotees. So one may be performing some fruit of sacrifice, and then, for instance, Maharaj Nimi, while performing sacrifices, happened to come in contact with the Navayogendra. And because of that, he became completely purified by their association. And in all other contexts, when one comes in contact with pure devotees, then one can become purified of that original intention to ask something from the Lord and simply take up the process of pure devotional service. One note about that is given in the Nectar devotion, and that is that while one is performing the process of devotional service, there may be ways in which one asks certain kinds of things from the Lord. For instance, if one is in a great distress or needs some material facility in order to perform devotional service, these kinds of requests that come in emergencies, as mentioned by Rupa Goswami, they are mentioned to not be outside the realm of pure devotional service because they're being asked out of a natural tendency to preserve oneself. And that means, that preservation means that one can go on with one's devotional service. So they're not against the rules of pure devotional service. It's not an unusual request from the Lord. So now we're going to take a few reflections. I have a few more points I want to make about these 3 verses, but because we went through them rather quickly in 1 hour, and I want to take the impressions that you have so far and any points that really stuck in your mind, and we'll look at those for a few minutes. Yes, Dhiraj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You mentioned in the verse 7:16 during the explanation that the intensity with which we call or connect with the Supreme Lord, that is more important than calling. Obviously calling you mentioned is important, but the quality of calling is very important. And you also mentioned Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explained how the desirer of wealth and the one who is in distress both culminate to a point of being inquisitive and learn about the Supreme Lord. And many more gems, but thank you for sharing these wonderful points.
And thank you for reflecting it back. It's an important point. The mood in which one calls out to Krishna is altogether important. And Queen Kunti mentions this in her prayers, Janmaishvara Shutra Shribir Edamana Madapuman Naivarhat Yavidatum Vai Twam Akinchana Gocharam. And that is that in order to effectively call out to Krishna, one must be akinchana, which means that one feels oneself bereft of any other shelter and any other source of maintenance. I don't have anything. There's a way in which, through my false ego, I consider that I'm sustained in many different ways. For instance, I might think that I'm sustained by what? Job. I have a good job. What else? Good wife. Yeah. Assets? What kind of assets? Buildings?
Intelligence.
Intelligence? Equities? Stocks, bonds? Cash in the bank? Gold hidden in the backyard in a coffee can? I mean, the mind might go there and think, it's okay. Whatever happens, I can go dig that little can up and I got gold in there. I'll be all right. So there's a list that Kunti gives, Janma Aishvarya Shuta Shibir. She talks about how one might become conceited or feel that I have these qualities because of my birth. I have a high birth, so I have some status. Aishvarya, I have some wealth and opulence. Ashuta, I'm very learned. We talked about this with Radhika Raman, that one might learn some Sanskrit and then think, yeah, I'm actually smarter than everybody else. This is not a qualification for devotional service. It can become a disqualification. And she lists it as a kind of intoxication with the material world. It gets in the veins, and then I feel that I'm okay. And actually, if you have a new car that's got a new car smell, you have a full tank of gas, and you're thinking, I've got money in the bank, you might roll down the window on a nice day and then kind of lean out like this. And like a couple fingers on the steering wheel. It's like, I'm good. I'm happy. And Gajendra was like that. In the description of Gajendra, he's like, I'm the king. He was even a little intoxicated. And everyone would get out of his way. And it was like, okay, go ahead. And he had everything together until the crocodile grabbed him. And then he's like, hey, really, I have nothing. I can only depend on Krishna. And he called out with that mood that I'm fully dependent. So, yes, the quality of one's chanting, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, Enichi ashaudhimaya, nashi bharulagi, harinam mahamantra lao tumi magi. Magi means to beg. And if anybody's ever been bereft and then become a beggar, to ask for, please, I have nothing to offer, I have no qualification, but please just give me anyway. This is the mood in which, if one calls out to the Supreme, there's a likelihood of his reciprocation. What else? Yes?
I like the point that if you go to Krishna with material desires, he would provide it in such a way that you lose interest in those, and you feel that that is as important as Dhruva Maharaj, though he got the planet, but he felt that, okay.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, even after Dhruva got it and didn't want it, Krishna insisted that he take it anyway, and live for thousands of years as a ruler of the kingdom. And Krishna also doesn't want one to become attached to being detached. In the story of Sudama Brahmana, Sudama was living in a very poverty-stricken condition, and his wife nudged him that, you went to Gurukul with Krishna, and he lives in a palace. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Perhaps you can just go see him. And when he left, he took a little gift, which was just borrowed from the neighbors, a little bit of chipped rice that he wrapped in his kind of torn up cloth. And when he entered into that beautiful palace and he met Krishna, who got down from his seat and worshipped him as a Brahmana and honored him as his beautiful friend from the Gurukul and remembered their pastimes there at Sandipani Muni's school, and he washed his feet and he gave him sweet words, and the goddess Fortune was fanning him. And then when it was time to go, Krishna said, I think you brought me something. And Sudama was so embarrassed. Krishna took it by force, and he took one time, 2 times, and then the goddess of Fortune said, that's enough. I can't reciprocate with more with him because I'm so indebted already that from that chipped rice. And when he went back home to what was a very poverty-stricken life, he now found it transformed into an opulent palace, more opulent than the kingdom of heaven. And in the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, it's mentioned that Krishna's reciprocating with him in this way was because Sudama was a little attached to being detached. And he didn't want his devotee to be attached or detached. So he gave him all this opulence, which, of course, Sudama then used completely in the service of Krishna. Yes?
So this is a text from Mayank Agarwal.
Mayank, and we didn't get an opportunity to welcome everybody who joined us on the internet, so please turn towards the camera and say Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining us. We feel your presence and we're very glad to be connected. Okay, so from Mayank.
So Mayank Agarwal says that right knowledge plus devotional bhakti bhavana is the most potent combination, as Krishna considers such devotees to be just like himself. Therefore, the ISKCON culture of cultivation of Vedic knowledge is such a supreme mission.
Thank you, Mayank. Yes.
Maharaj, in the first purport that we read, I see Prabhupada so much encouraging that even though you have this desire, that desire, or your artho jigyasu, you just come in association of pure devotee and everything will be like you can again reach to the highest stage. He quoted like many times that the solution is to get association of pure devotees, and that is the ultimate thing. And I was remembering once we read I think last year, that Brihad Bhagavatam, one special section you took in which I think there were multiple pages, around 20 pages of purport for the Pure Devotees Association, how it is.
Yes, right, we did go through that. And not only there, but also in Lord Chaitanya's instructions to Srila Sanatana Goswami, he begins by discussing how devotional service is born from association with devotees, it's maintained by them, and one reaches the perfectional stage of devotional service by association with devotees. So this is the means through which one can advance, is by sadhu sangha. Thank you. Navina, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
You talked about praying to the Lord, asking for something in our favor. In ISKCON, it's quite common for others to request us to pray for them. Please pray for me, Prabhu. I don't know for what, but I'm traveling, I'm going somewhere. Please pray for me, Prabhu. So what do we do? How do we react? So we be genuine to the person that's requesting us to do something on behalf of him to the Lord.
What to do?
What to do?
I recommend that you offer a prayer immediately, as soon as they ask you. And you can offer prayer in the way that Srila Prabhupada taught us. My Lord, if you so desire, please help this devotee. You can say their name, and please give them pure devotional service and assist them in all ways. Thank you for considering my request. Do it right away. Yes.
And
we'd like to welcome Bhakti Deepti. She came all the way from Minnesota. Please welcome.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Minnesota, where the state bird is the mosquito.
I'm not mosquito.
Okay, go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Please accept my humble obeisances. And the point in that, I think in 7:16, it is important that if you have intense desire to know the Krishna, then Krishna will provide that knowledge and then circumstances to go into the proper path.
Yes, and this is mentioned. I mentioned some verses in the Bhagavad Gita. One of them, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. To those who worship me with love, I give the intelligence how they can come to me. This is such a reassuring verse, isn't it? And many people who read the Bhagavad Gita, who are inspired seekers in life, and coming across this verse feel, oh yes, this is something I'm already experiencing. That I have some desire, I don't know where it came from, but I'm seeking the absolute truth, and now I'm getting instruction from within my heart. And just by hearing Krishna's words, they begin developing a relationship with him and appreciation that he's reciprocating. There's a way in which Krishna provides full facility for us to indulge our misuse of independence by having a kingdom of illusion. And there's so much facility here to be an illusion. Isn't there? Or is it just me? It seems to be unlimited, and one could go on practically forever in illusion in the material world, and Krishna will give that kind of facility. So if somebody then changes their mind, and that's one nice thing about being a living entity, you can change your mind at any time. It happens, doesn't it? Somebody, you want some potatoes? I don't want potatoes. They walk away, say, I want potatoes. Living entities can just change their mind at any time. It's like, you don't want to surrender to Krishna? No, I hate God. And it's like 2 minutes later, no, I changed my mind. I want to surrender. But as soon as one makes that determination within one's heart, that very second, Krishna detects it and begins to then give. Imagine how much facility he gives for illusion. Imagine how much facility he gives for somebody to come to bhakti, to attain, to have everything that they need. All spiritual paraphernalia, Prabhupada mentions, becomes manifested to those who endeavor for bhakti and chant Hare Krishna. All facility. And part of that facility comes in what may be considered negative forms, taking away things that are not favorable for my devotional service. And I think, why did that happen? But those who become mature think, oh, well, that really helped because I wasn't able to give it up myself. Parikshit Maharaj is an example. When he got the news that he had been cursed to die in 7 days, and then out of the great humility of the pure devotee said that I was unwilling to give up the kingdom on my own. I never would have done it. So Krishna now helped me. He's making me walk away. So this is a great benefit for me. So Krishna's there giving that facility to us in whatever form we may ask for it. Yes. What else? Navina?
Questions are okay?
Yes.
I was just reading today in Chaitanya Charitamrita how when Rupa and Sanatan retired, they divided their wealth, and it's a topic, what is retirement and provisions, and it says that Rupa, he foresaw that there would be maybe some legal implications, so he kept some money aside. But then we also have the other story from when Sanatan came with that blanket. Mahaprabhu glanced at it and he didn't approve of it. So what is the proper way for devotees to move more towards renunciation? How much provision they should keep, and how much they should just realize that it's just time to walk, and I may not need a second shirt, and even a blanket may be too much.
Well, first of all, we can't keep anything. Whether you decide to renounce something or not, one should understand that you can't keep it anyhow. One, Krishna says, has to act according to one's qualification. Swe swe adhikariya nishta saguna parikirtita. This is his instruction to Uddhava and to all of us, and that is that everyone has a particular qualification and set of propensities, And when one engages those propensities in Krishna's service, according to one's natural ability, this is called good quality. And viparyot doshasya, the opposite is true. If one artificially tries to renounce the world, then this is a fault. The goal is not a renunciation, but it is attachment to Krishna, attachment to devotional service, attachment to the devotees. And in the course of becoming more and more attached to one's service and to the chanting process, then what looks like to the rest of the world renunciation occurs naturally. The Goswamis are mentioned, Tyakva Turnamashesha Mandalapati Shainim Sada Tuchavat. They weren't so much giving up the material world as they were running towards Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because they had something better. So renunciation, of course, for its own sake is not in our interest, but accepting whatever is necessary for increasing one's service to Krishna is the best kind of renunciation. The Bhagavatam gives this prescription: Kamasya nendriya pritir labo jiveta yavata jivasya tattva jignasya narto yascheha karmavi. And that is that you should use whatever you have, whatever is given to you, whatever facility at all comes to you, not for sense gratification, not even one farthing, penny, yen, but you should use it for Krishna service. Kama says it should never be used for sense gratification. So life's desire should never be aimed at sense gratification, but one is entitled to live a balanced, healthy life for the sake of preserving oneself for going on with the process of devotional service. And in the course of one's life, at different junctures, there'll be different prescriptions for everybody how to do that. So it's in the story of Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami, we find that there are different phases of their renunciation. And not only that, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu especially engaged them in severe renunciation. He engaged Raghunath Das Goswami in severe renunciation as an example to the world that even the wealthiest and the most opulent, because they're so absorbed in devotional service, can live in a completely renounced way. Other great devotees like Pundarik Vijayanidhi, who Lord Chaitanya considered to be the topmost of the devotees, lived in very opulent surroundings. And Mahaprabhu didn't notice or disparage that in the least, because each person has a particular way in which they engage everything in Krishna service. Does that help? Not that you needed any help, but thanks for bringing up the question. So yes, go ahead.
So this is Varshana Mataji from the East Coast. So 2 comments from her side. One is that, a comment and a question. So the comment is that just as Gajendra came to know that he has nothing and then he surrendered to the Lord, similarly we should also surrender into the lotus feet of Lord Shri Krishna. Then
Good advice.
And then her question is that knowing that we have to surrender, but it seems that I'm not serious enough. So what should I do to get serious in bhakti and surrender unto his lotus feet?
Well, one thing is to be thoughtful. The verse in the Bhagavatam which mentions Tashchadadhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya pashyantyatmani chatmanam bhaktya shuta grihitaya. This verse mentions that one's devotional service should be fortified with scriptural knowledge. In the Bhagavatam, Krishna says that one should be thoughtful and observe the environment that one lives in very carefully. That is, take a look around and he says, Ashruti pratyakshamaitiyam anumanam chatushparam. There's 4 kinds of evidence that one can use to discern that the material world is not stable. Has anybody noticed that? It's not entirely stable. So Krishna says, look into it. And how? He says, Shruti, look at the Shruti. Pratyaksha, take direct perception into account. Shruti pratyaksham anuman. Anuman means logical deduction, that you can look at the poetry of the world. In fact, there's a poem, Ozymandias. I think who's it by Shelley? And he's talking about this statue in the desert. There's a ruin in the middle of the desert, and it's of a great king. And his stone statue had been carved thousands of years before and had since fallen into a ruin. Now his face has been worn away by the sands on the desert and the sands of time. And there's an inscription at the bottom, here stands Ozymandias, the great king, who doesn't cower before any enemy. And there he is lying in the desert in that form. So one can observe that the material world has its way of taking away everything and wearing down even the so-called greatest of entrepreneurs, takes away their lives and so forth. And ITM means by traditional knowledge that gets passed down. So he said, use these 4 kinds of evidence, vikalpatsa virajite, to understand that the world is of an asthana, it's not stable. So one should be thoughtful. And the verse I first quoted, Tachchadadhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya, one should take help from the scripture. You should hear regularly. If you're not fortified by scripture, don't walk out the door. And don't turn on anything. Don't turn any switches on until you've actually fortified yourself with scripture. Before you turn on any buttons that have electricity, be careful, because sound might come out that will overcome your consciousness. First, of course, if it's your Veda base, that's okay. But the point is, you should fortify yourself by hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam regularly before you dare take any of the information coming from the environment and the material world into your mental system. And then the verse says you should be thoughtful also. The thoughtful sage, fortified with knowledge and renunciation, is able to progress on the path of bhakti without wavering. Tashchadadhana munayo jnana vairagya yuktaya. So Jiva Goswami says in his Bhakti Sandarbha, this means he has to be thoughtful. So you have to be thoughtful. You can't just mindlessly perform devotional service. Of course you can. But if you're thoughtful about it and you look carefully, why am I doing this? You can be like Maharishi Kadvanga. Kadvanga was a great devotee. He was a very strong king. He was recruited by the demigods. I guess they picked him up on waivers and brought him onto their team to fight against the demons for a long time. And then after his tenure, they wanted to offer him a benediction. He said, all I want to know is how long I'm going to live. And they looked at their Apple Watches and they said, you got about a minute left. And then he said, now I surrender to Krishna. He took that last second. So a thoughtful person will analyze that I don't have much time. And in a moment, my point is about Kadvanga, one might change the trajectory of one's consciousness and say, now I can become serious because I realize what situation I'm in. Living entities can do that. This is part of the essence of meditation, introspection, to look carefully within and say, what do I actually have? Nothing. How much time do I actually have? I have no idea. That's a little bit startling. If you could take a little nap and lie down and hear your heart beating and say, thank you for beating. By the way, why are you beating? How are you beating? And the heart says back, I don't know either. And I don't know for how long. One might then get back up and say, okay, I think I'll chant more than sleep. There's an awareness that's available to anyone who simply becomes thoughtful. So if you become thoughtful and take advantage of the information that's already in front of you, then you can become serious also. It's a prerogative of each living entity to become serious. No one can stop you from being serious. You can become a very whimsical person. And then it may require that somebody slap you upside the head so you sober up. I was told staying at Govardhan, our Mangal Arti starts at 4:15. I forgot that one year and I got there at 4:30. I was like, you're 15 minutes late. But I made a vow that I'd be on time for all the Mangal Artiks. So one morning I was running up the stairs and I heard the conch blowing and I was still about 10 seconds away. So as I barreled through one of the stone archways in the dark, bang, right on my head. And I went flying back, and I woke up a second later and said, where am I? And I thought, actually, I needed that. Thank you, Krishna. It knocked a little seriousness into me. I felt like, so sometimes when somebody smacks you like that, then you get a little serious too. If somebody chastises you, that can be serious. So be around people. There's an old saying, if you're the smartest one in the room, you're in the wrong room. If you're the most advanced one in the room, you're in the wrong room. Try to get in a room where people are more serious than you and will point out the fact that you're not that serious. If they chastise you a little bit, then you can also become serious really quickly. Somebody says, don't do that, put that down. And he's like, oh God, I got to get serious now. You might have that feeling, so stick around people who will chastise you. When people sign up for having a spiritual master, the whole idea is they're going there is like, okay, correct me. Officially, you're in charge of correcting me. You tell me what's wrong. And if you're a good disciple, you'll come and you'll say, I really want you to chastise me. And you're open for it. Or you can even ask Krishna. You can say, Krishna, I'm such a rascal. Please chastise me. If you dare do that, then Krishna will oblige you and you become serious. There's a lot of ways that you can be serious, and it's a good occupation. What are you doing now? I'm trying to become serious in various ways. Yes. What is it?
Vaikuntha Nayak also sent.
Vaikuntha Nayak, okay. When Vaikuntha Nayak calls in.
Danvats Maharaj, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Takeaway from me, there are two. The first is accumulation of Sukriti gives rise to Shraddha. It's wonderful to know how Sukriti carries over different lifetimes. And the second takeaway is that Jnani can be Nishkam, that is with no material desires, but yet if he doesn't have Achyut Bhav, he's not progressing. Loved how the verses from Srimad Bhagavatam transformed Sukhdev Goswami from Jnani to a devotee.
Very nice. Thank you so much. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
The other day, someone said to me that this someone is a Christian, and they said to me that I don't believe in Krishna, I only believe in my God. And it kind of just got silent after that because I didn't really know what to say. So how do you respond to something like that?
Well, it's sometimes if you're dealing with somebody who's intractable, you know what intractable means? It's like they actually don't want to know anything. They just want to argue, and they have one-sided opinion, and it's not like they're inquiring from you at all. Somebody might be fanatical. You know what a fanatic is? What? Give us a definition, Shraddha, official definition. Go ahead, tell us what you think it is, and then she'll tell you what the definition is.
A fanatic is pretty much like someone who's really confident in their beliefs and doesn't really address anybody else's beliefs, I say.
That's pretty nice. Thank you. Let's hear the other one, what the dictionary says.
Fanatic as a noun, it means a person filled with excessive and single-minded zeal, especially for an extreme religious or political cause.
Okay, well, I once read a book called How to Win an Argument, and in it he had a section about fanatics, and he had the first rule in dealing with fanatics. Should I teach it to you? Yes. Don't. And in fact, the Bhagavatam says, there's Ishvare Taradineshu Balisheshu Dusatsucha Prema Maitri Kripopeksha Yakaroti Samadhyama. The Madhyama Adhikari who's going out teaching Krishna consciousness should be aware of four classes of people. Well, four entities. One is Krishna, and for Krishna he should develop love. For the devotees he should develop appropriate friendship. For the innocent he should try to pour in as much mercy as possible. And for the fanatics who don't want to hear anything and who are averse to what you're saying, he says, upeksha, you avoid them. You don't have to deal with them. Having said that, in communicating with people who take an extreme position and challenge you in a certain way, it's often most effective to answer a question with a question. Because whoever's asking the questions in the conversation is leading the conversation. And it also is very helpful if you really want to help somebody. It's better to ask questions to refine what they're getting at when they make a point. So what did the person say to you?
She said that I don't believe in Krishna, but I believe in my God. And what confuses me is that...
Well, wait, that she didn't say confuses. That's what the part she did. So, you know, if you wanted to pursue the conversation against the advice of the author of the book who said don't, you could, and the Bhagavatam, you could ask, who's Krishna? What would she say then? Who is Krishna?
I've never asked her that, so...
No, what if you did? What do you anticipate she would say?
I think she would say, I don't know.
Okay, then what do you mean? You don't believe in something you don't know? Is that what you're saying? So, you know, if somebody says, you know, are you a Hindu? It's like, I don't know, what's your definition of Hindu? What would somebody say? They won't say anything because nobody knows. So, you know, if you get a question or a statement and you want to pursue it and you don't know what it is, you don't know what to say, don't answer it. It's just like if you're playing tennis and you get a ball that you can't, you know, you have to hit it. You have to get a question that you can actually deal with, or better, cricket. Sorry, you wait for a pitch that you can hit. So, you know, ask a question, get another pitch, and it helps people sometimes refine, because oftentimes people are sincere, and you ask a question, you say, if you don't know what to ask specifically, you can always say this: how do you mean that? Say that.
How do you mean that?
Yeah, if you ask people, how do you mean that? Then they have to think about it and say, like, you asked me the question, tell what that friend of yours said, colleague. Say it.
I don't believe in Krishna, I only believe in my God.
How do you mean that?
I don't know.
Okay, well, when you know something, then we'll talk again. So, just oftentimes these kind of intractable situations where, you know, somebody brings up something dogmatically and they really don't know what they're talking about, you can help them out by asking them, you know, how do you mean that? Just how do you mean that? In fact, try it in normal conversation. If you're talking to your friend or your spouse or anybody like that, and they say, you know, something, and you say, how do you mean that? And then it takes it to another level. They have to break it down and give you a little more information. And when you have more information and you can actually get something that you can handle, then you can have a conversation. You know, Prabhupada, when devotees first came to India, American devotees first came to India, Westerners, and they were getting approached by many people saying, you know, what do you think of Swami such and such? Because there's, you know, people like, how do you compare this one to that one? What do you think of this Swami? And the devotees asked Prabhupada, how do we deal with all these particular requests? And Prabhupada said, ask him, what is his philosophy? So someone says, you know, what about Swami Bhoga Ananda? And it's like, I don't know Swami Bhoga Ananda. What's his philosophy? And then they have to say, well, he believes this, this, and that. And then you can compare it to the Bhagavad Gita. And you don't assail the person, but you find the details of what the philosophy is and then deal with the parts of it that you can actually address responsibly, according to your knowledge. But if you get into a whirlpool of discussion where nobody knows what they're actually arguing about, which is one of the points that he brings up in his book, How to Win an Argument. He says, generally, people don't know what they're arguing about. One person saying this, that, and oftentimes the argument goes off track. It goes off in a completely different direction, and they don't even know at the end why they ended up in a certain place. So you have to bring it back into focus. Okay? Yes?
So I always like this story that you share about Khatvanga, and it just highlights on the power of the jiva that it has to change. And I also like the point where you talk about, several times in your classes you talk about the heart beating, and when you're aware that you're actually alive and it's doing it voluntarily. And I was reading this article recently, and it was about 29 words that describe our most obscure emotions in the English language that we never use. And one of them is rubatosis, which means the unsettling awareness of your own heartbeat.
Rubatosis.
Rubatosis, yeah.
Wow. I think I have that. Thank you very much. I'm glad to have the name, rubatosis. Yeah, the unsettling
awareness of one's own heartbeat.
Of one's own heartbeat. Very interesting. Thank you. Rubatosis.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thanks for the wonderful class. I actually just wanted to add to the point that she was mentioning.
Please.
When we do book distribution, this comes a lot, especially in the mini festival. People come and stop and watch our play over there, and then when we give them something, they say, "Oh, I'm a Muslim or a Christian," or something like that, and we have to counter that or come up with some conducive thing. So based on what they say, we come up with something accordingly. For example, if they say, "I won't take this prasad because I'm a Muslim," so you know that they believe in a God. So then you say, "Oh yeah, we believe in God too." And if someone says, "No, we don't believe in Krishna," then we realize that he is kind of trying to push back. So then accordingly, at least for me, what I decide is, if I can win something, at least might as well make him say Krishna as much as possible. So I didn't ask a question about Krishna. So he has to utter the word Krishna. It doesn't matter what he says. But as far as he says Krishna, at least I got something back from him. So according to what they say, kind of change the wave or the path of the discussion.
Yeah, this is a bona fide strategy. It was used by Gadadhar Das. You'll read this in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, that he became angry at the Muslim Qazi because the Qazi was preventing the Sankirtan from going on in Navadvip. So he ran into the Qazi's house and he demanded, "You come down here and chant Hare Krishna right now." And then the Qazi came down. He said, "Who is this little guy in here demanding all these things?" He said, "I'll come and chant Hare Krishna tomorrow." And Gadadhar Das began dancing. He said, "Why tomorrow? You just did it now." So there are a couple points, practical points that I want to mention. One was that in the purport, Prabhupada mentioned that the three qualities that are retrograde in devotional practice, that take one away from advancing in devotional service. And the three were being selfish, irregular, and without spiritual goals. Selfish, irregular, and without spiritual goals. So, what would be the antithesis of these three? Okay, deal with the first one first. Selfless. And how would that be applied in your in daily life? Being selfless. Go ahead, you're about to say.
Being selfless would be, distribute Krishna consciousness freely to everybody, just, rather than keeping to ourselves.
Okay, what else? Selfless?
Not expecting anything in return.
Yeah, service for service. One more? Yes?
Having the knowledge that everything belongs to Krishna, then it's no longer yours.
Oh, very
then
nice.
you are more open for sharing it.
Isavasambidam sarvam. Yet kincha. Very good. Okay. And how about, you had one more? Preeti Sandarbha, give her a mic. You don't have to get up, they'll bring it to you. Or pass it efficiently. 2. How many hands does it have to go through? 3.
Being selfless means keep doing your duties in spite of the external situations.
Yes. Okay. And how about the opposite of irregular? Yeah, well, how does that manifest in your daily life? In a positive way for devotional service? Yes? Regulation?
Yeah, Prabhuji. Regulate your spiritual life by chanting like fixed number of rounds every day.
Okay, numerical strength. You say, I don't do less than this, right? Especially with chanting, and you can add that to anything else you want. What other parts about being regular? Yes?
Reading.
Just saying that it gives really, as Prabhupada says, real freedom and happiness. Because when you're regular in your spiritual activities, you're not entangling yourself in like what you call accumulated disaster. Like one day if we don't do, someday it'll come and hit us. But so we become free because we don't end up in that disaster, and it also gives happiness and self-confidence.
Yes, thank you very much. The verse that precedes Prasade Sarvadukkanam is? This verse says when one gets this complete mercy of the Lord. Which indicates that by taking the regulative principles of freedom, one gets the complete mercy of the Lord. Make your point. Go ahead. Raga dvesha vimuktaistu vishayan indriyaischaran atmavashera vateyatma prasadam arigachati. By regulating one's life according to the scripture, one can get the complete mercy of the Lord. One more about regulation.
But you mentioned that don't turn on any switches unless you fortify yourself with the scriptures.
Yeah, don't turn on anything until you're fortified. Okay, regulate yourself. So first of all, be selfless, be regulated, and the third one is the detriment is being without spiritual goals. So what's the opposite of that? Possible? Yes. Like what? 16 rounds. Name some spiritual goals. 16 rounds, try to saying what else?
20,000 books distributed.
20,000 books distributed in the next month. Yes? Say that in the mic.
To beat LA Temple every year.
To do what?
To beat LA Temple.
To beat LA. Be careful, they might be listening. Okay. Yes?
Setting goals like in our spiritual life.
But I like how you think, definitely. Okay, go ahead.
Like setting goals like how much service we should do when we come to the temple and all that.
Okay. Yes? Deepti? Reading every day. You can set a goal for how much you read. Possible? Absolutely. Yes?
Building ISV home base.
Building ISV home base. Yeah, you can make goals for building things for Krishna. So these three items, being selfless, being regulated, and making spiritual goals, can help one to become very quickly advanced in devotional service and overcome the unwanted desires that make the difference between, as Prabhupada mentions in this purport, mixed devotional service and pure devotional service. There are various obstacles that one can notice in oneself that one is overcoming. Those are mentioned in detail in the scripture. There are various anartas to overcome, but I'm not going to go into detail because we've got 10 minutes left and it's time to have a kirtan. Hare Krishna. So we heard 3 verses from a section of the Bhagavad Gita, which is dealing with pure devotional service. This is the middle 6 chapters of the Gita. And these particular verses are very sweet because Krishna is mentioning how in any way that one approaches him, one is considered to be a great personality, a great soul. But especially those who are engaged in ekabhaktir, which means the pursuit of pure devotional service. Krishna is particularly pleased with these devotees. So all of you are on that path, so you should be happy. Krishna likes you. Just for being a human, Krishna says to Uddhava in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, out of all the species, the humans are the best. I like them the best. And out of all the humans, those who are engaged in the process of devotional service are the best. And especially those who are engaged in devotional service and are teaching Krishna consciousness to others. Krishna says, there's nobody better than that. So that's something, a gift that we've been given. This sampradaya means that we've been bequeathed this gift to engage in this Eka Bhaktir. Hare Krishna. Gaur Premanande, Hari Hari Bo.
Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.